What's going on, Saints fans? This is Ross Jackson with Canal Street Chronicles, and while the questions are still being answered about the Saints' future after Drew Brees, they set themselves up in the present just fine with a ninth straight win, 10-2, becoming the first team in the 2020 NFL season to clinch a playoff spot. We'll talk about how it all went down and what's up next for the New Orleans Saints here on another episode of What Just Happened. So let's start first back at the second game against the Atlanta Falcons. The Saints winning that Week 13 matchup 21-16 in a score that looked a little bit closer than it needed to. A late score by the Atlanta Falcons as they began to surge their way back after the Saints offense sort of hit some, let's just say, bumpy parts of the road in the second half. But in the first half, it felt like it was all Taysom Hill all the time, playing his best game as a starter for the New Orleans Saints thus far. Again, the path got a little bit more rocky in the second half, but in the first half, he threw 2 touchdowns on 2 great reads. First on a man-beating mesh concept to Traquan Smith, who was left wide open in the end zone. And the second touchdown to Jared Cook, who was on a double post route coming from the left side, and a great zone read, or read against zone coverage, rather, by Taysom Hill to make that throw into the end zone. Jared Cook, of course, was looking to redeem himself after an early third down drop as well. Then you saw Alvin Kamara also get into the end zone in this one, getting his second career touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, again, right after halftime, things kind of got a little bit more rocky for Taysom Hill. Atlanta started changing up some coverages, saving some things for the second half that actually benefited them pretty well and put them in a position to where they could have closed the gap in the game. Taysom did come out and lead a great 12-play opening drive in the second half that ended with an Alvin Kamara touchdown, the second of his career against the Atlanta Falcons. But after that, that offense kind of grew stagnant. Of course, everyone's going to talk about the Taysom Hill fumbles, plural, because he did have the one that came off of Matt Ryan's fumble, where the Saints forced a turnover, a rare strip sack for them. There's some conversation about whether or not it was actually a throw. You get to the same thing about Taysom Hill's fumble as well, but I felt that those 2 fumbles were called pretty consistently with one another. But Taysom getting that ball down to the Saints getting that ball down to the 5-yard line, calling a passing play down there on 2nd and goal. Not entirely necessary, but Jared Cook was open, but unfortunately Taysom Hill wasn't able to get the ball out in time. He ended up taking some contact by a defender as he rolled out to his right, then tried to throw the ball out of bounds and throw it away, but was hit while he was throwing, leading to a fumble. The Falcons turned that turnover into points on the opposite side with a Russell Gage touchdown, about 10 yards from outside the end zone there. The only red zone possession where the Atlanta Falcons came away with a touchdown. The Saints defense doing a great job holding the Atlanta Falcons to 1-4 on possessions in the red zone. They did a very good job there, including a stop coming up before the end of the game where the New Orleans Saints had some trouble moving the ball toward the end of the game there. The last 2 possessions, 21 yards and 6 yards respectively, including a fumble by Taysom Hill that went behind him and out of bounds, so it fumbled safely. It was a little bit of luck, but at least it got out of bounds. It was not a turnover, so at least there was that. That's going to be everybody's biggest question about Taysom Hill going into Sunday's game against the Philadelphia Eagles, presuming that he's playing. There's some questions about whether or not Drew Brees is actually going to be able to come back. I don't think he should, personally. I want to see more Taysom Hill. I want Taysom to have more opportunities to prove himself. We've seen Jameis Winston as a starter in the NFL. Now let's get our full of seeing Taysom Hill and at least get him over 100 passing attempts. He's only at 81 so far. It's tough to base a real evaluation off of such a small sample size. But one of the big evaluating tools that we'll be using as we continue to move ahead with Taysom Hill and seeing more of him on the field is whether or not he can improve his ball security. We know that that is something that Sean Payton has absolutely no tolerance for, and we've seen that before. Think back to Mark Ingram years ago, where he just pulled him off the field after a couple of fumbles. So I imagine that's something that they are working on very, very intently during the practice week and trying to get whatever that issue is, that ball security issue, tightened up for Taysom Hill. But this game really ended up coming down to everyone performing around Taysom as well. Michael Thomas had a fantastic day. Traquan Smith, of course, caught that touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders, a few catches. The ball simply got spread out a lot more in the passing game in this one, and that was a welcome sight, especially after the Denver Broncos game, where the game plan was so, limiting and was a little bit more, don't take any risk, be a bit more of a game manager. So we didn't see a lot of that when we saw 44 runs in that game. We saw over 30 in this game. Yet again, the Saints running for over 200 yards for the second week in a row. So they've also been able to churn out yardage on the ground and able to do that with some backup offensive linemen in place as well, or at least one for this game. James Hurst starting in place of Teron Armstead, who's on the COVID reserve list. We also saw Nick Easton starting for Cesar Ruiz. Looks like they just need to give the rookie some more time to really develop into his new position. Remember, he had an abbreviated training camp coming into the NFL, but was also injured for half of it, and then spent half of the time that he was in training camp at center as opposed to right guard, and is now playing right guard in the NFL against NFL starters. So I understand why they made the switch to Nick Easton there, but Nick Easton gave up a couple of pressures. Andrus Peat had a bit of a rough day as well. So, and he was just coming back from his concussion. And so, I think you'll continue to see this offensive line perform well and continue to get better with Teron Armstead. I imagine coming back this week, he should be eligible to come off the COVID list this week. So hopefully he's healthy enough to be able to do that. Of course, if nothing amongst anything else, we just wish for his health and his safety. But over on the defensive side, you saw the defense play a very good game here. There were some, big plays and things like that, but that's just what the Falcons offense can do. Calvin Ridley had a great day. He went over 100 yards. Julio Jones over 90 yards. The Saints also playing essentially down to a third string cornerback, even a fourth string cornerback, if you want to look at it that way, with PJ Williams on the outside, because there was no Janoris Jenkins in this game after his knee injury against the Denver Broncos. Then Patrick Robinson got hurt early on in the game. And then so PJ Williams had to line up with Julio Jones. A lot of people had tweeted me and they were asking me about why is PJ Williams on Julio Jones. Well, don't forget the last time he was on Calvin Ridley, he gave up like over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns on 2 quarters and a possession. So not a great look for PJ Williams to be over on Calvin Ridley. But it was a bit of a struggle for the Saints passing offense, particularly late in the game passing defense, particularly late in the game in the fourth quarter, but nothing that was insurmountable. I mean, they buttoned up when they needed to. They forced a turnover on downs, including in the red zone, right? They forced an uncatchable pass to Julio Jones in the end zone, if I remember correctly. It just sailed over his head. Good coverage by PJ Williams and Marcus Williams in the end zone there. So a great job, using inside leverage, using outside leverage, knowing that you have your safety help to the inside. So PJ Williams stayed on the outside. Very good bracketing, a good example of how to defend Julio Jones and how to try to neutralize him in the red zone. They did a great job of that. And then they forced the Atlanta Falcons to have to throw a Hail Mary at the end of the game. Calvin Ridley, very little focus on trying to catch the Hail Mary, was a little bit more into the idea of throwing a flying elbow, or maybe even the people's elbow if you're a wrestling fan, if you're a old WWE fan, right into CJ Gardner-Johnson. So, hey, look, CJ Gardner-Johnson helps to win the game again by getting into another wide receiver's head so much that he doesn't even try to make a play at the end of the game. Just goes after CJ. The Saints also limited the Atlanta Falcons run game, which was very much expected. 3.3 yards per carry on the day there. They stay right with their league average. The Saints are still among the best when it comes to several defensive rankings. Alex Anzalone said before the season that they wanted to be a top 5 defense across several categories. Here's how they're doing so far. So the Saints right now are number 1 in the NFL in total defense at 288.8 yards allowed per game. Number 14 in passing defense at 212.8 yards per game. Number 2 in run defense. Number 4 in points per game allowed. So they're doing a very good job. The passing defense would need a little bit of work there for certain, but I think you'll take that. I mean, I'll take a middle ground passing defense that's not allowing scores, right? Because the Saints still only allowed their first touchdown in this game in 42 offensive possessions, the first time since the first quarter of the San Francisco game in week 10. So, I mean, look, the defense is performing extremely well, doing a good job. They're 10th in takeaways as well, and only have 12 giveaways, tied for third fewest in the NFL over on the offensive side. So taking care of the ball, but they're also giving their offense additional possessions. It's going to be very important moving forward here, whether it's Taysom Hill, Drew Brees under center, whoever it may be. Let's take a look at some of our top performers from this game. Taysom Hill completing 27 of 37 passes, 232 yards, and then 2 passing touchdowns. He had 2 rushing touchdowns the last time, and then threw for 233 yards last time. So he's continued to have success against the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons still struggled against them. The only thing was that when you got into the second half, they changed up some coverages, and it just made things a little bit more challenging for Taysom Hill. But you know what? They won the game, and that's another positive step forward, I would say, for Taysom so far in the heir apparent conversation. And to see him throw 2 touchdowns after not throwing a pair of touchdowns in the first 2 weeks was a welcome sight for sure. Alvin Kamara had 15 carries, 88 rushing yards, and again, his second career touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons, 1 rushing touchdown in this game. Still not very involved in the passing game with Taysom Hill under center. We see it. Everyone sees it. Everyone knows it. The team sees it. The organization sees it. They know it. We'll see how they continue to adjust it. Michael Thomas, 9 catches, 105 yards, so another successful game against the Atlanta Falcons, coming off of a 9-catch, 104-yard day against them just 2 weeks ago. Michael Thomas is back. That's a great thing. James Hurst, who was standing in place of Teron Armstead, who again was on the COVID IR list, he ended up allowing 0 pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, standing in over at left tackle. Great news. Great job by James Hurst, the free agent add this past offseason, who was suspended the first 4 games, ended up making the team. Very, very good addition, because it does something to where usually when the Saints would be out Teron Armstead, they would have to move Andrews Pete to tackle, and then they would have to fill somebody else in at left guard. And then you're moving 2 players as opposed to just replacing the player that's already left. So now they're able to a little bit more immediately replace Teron Armstead, and that's a really, really great opportunity for them. Let's jump over. Oh, real quick, Taysom Hill also 14 carries and 83 rushing yards as well that he added on day, including a big 43-yarder early on in the game. Not early on in the game, but in the first half. Very, very good play there. He also timed out at, I think it was 20.43 miles per hour. He was the top timed in terms of speed performer in this game for either team. Jump over to the defensive side. Demario Davis leading the team in tackles again, 9 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, and a quarterback hit. Him and Quan Alexander have been so much fun. We did see a lot more base defense. Alex Anzalone and Zach Bond getting on the field more times since Quan Alexander joined this team. They were on the field 9 times in this game. Not any indictment at all on Quan Alexander. They just happened to play a few more, a little bit more of the base defense in this game, and it worked out really well for them there. I think, if I remember correctly, Alex Anzalone also had a tackle for a loss. He at least had a run stop, which was great. Marcus Williams, 7 tackles in this game, including some tackles down in the box in the run game, collapsing down, making some tackles that would have been touchdown saving tackles in a couple of occasions as well. And also had a pass defended, a very important pass defended, of course. David Onyemata added another sack on his incredible season. David Onyemata's underpaid, y'all. He just signed a brand new extension. Then he's coming out and he's playing like this. That's something that I wanted to say real quick about the Saints. They seem to re-sign these players right now. David Onyemata, Alvin Kamara, Demario Davis, and then they come out and perform, right? There's always that concern that when you sign a new contract that the player will sort of fall off and get comfortable. Not the case in the Saints. Culture. David Onyemata, though, 1 sack, 1 tackle for a loss, 4 tackles in this one. Carl Granderson added a sack. He also forced the fumble on Matt Ryan that caused the only turnover for the Falcons in this game, the one of 2 takeaways in the game. Trey Hendrickson also got his 10. He's now got 10 and a half sacks on the season. What? This dude's got 10 and a half sacks on the season. It's insane. It's incredible. So awesome for him. He got another sack in this one. He and Cam Jordan actually fought a little bit. Not actually fought, but, played around, joked around about who that sack should belong to at the end of that play. But ultimately, it goes to Trey Hendrickson, who now has 10 and a half on the season. Pretty incredible for a team that was about to rewrite the NFL rule books, honestly, to get Jadeveon Clowney in New Orleans. And then Trey Hendrickson comes out and says, all right, bet 10 and a half for you right here in week 13. So the big storyline coming up for next weekend, this Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles, the Saints traveling to Philadelphia. It's their final road game of a 3-game road trip. They look to win 10 and a half. See, I'm still thinking about Trey Hendrickson. 10 games in a row, which will put them at 11-2. That win would clinch the NFC South for them. They've already clinched the playoff spot, but they need one more win to clinch the NFC South with the tiebreaker, because they've now swept Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Are 1 win away from sweeping the NFC South. They'd be the first NFC South team to do it since it was realigned in 2002. But the big news going into Sunday's game in Philly is going to be Taysom Hill, of course, but also another quarterback change on the opposite side with the Philadelphia Eagles in Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has been named the starter for week 14, in place of Carson Wentz, who has been bad so far this season. I mean, bad. And so now you're going to see Jalen Hurts under center. So a couple of things to know about Jalen Hurts coming into the NFL out of the 2019 draft, the 2020 draft, but coming out of his 2019 final season in college football. He was one of my favorite quarterback prospects, but he is noted as a slow processor, somebody that holds on to the ball too long, but he is also noted as being somebody that's extremely accurate and sees a lot of success downfield. He had a lot of talent at Oklahoma. Of course, he had a very talented offensive line, had very talented skill position players. Not so much in Philly, right? Not so much in Philly, but how are the Saints going to counter going up against a more mobile quarterback? The good news is that the Saints just 2 weeks ago had to prepare for a mobile backfield of whomever was going to see the ball, because they also had wildcat formations and everything they had to deal with against the Denver Broncos. They had to plan for that on 24 hours notice, essentially. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see some of those defensive sets come up again against Jalen Hurts, because some of the big things are going to be utilizing your defensive ends, putting them out in that 7 or wide 9 formation to allow them to be able to contain and close off the edges for Jalen Hurts so that he doesn't have a lot of escape ability. You have to use one of the linebackers. The Saints do this though. They'll line somebody out toward outside of where a tight end would be or outside of the tight end, and then they'll use a linebacker in the C gap, for instance, to make sure that there's no off tackle runs or anything like that. So they'll have to dedicate some personnel to this as opposed to just the front four. But I can see them starting off in a place where they focus on contain when it comes to Jalen Hurts and then force him to throw the ball, but also do what they have to do in terms of diagnosing coverages. Dennis Allen's defense is not a great one right now, particularly with everybody that is sort of, clicking. Everything's clicking for the Saints defense. Not a great defense for a rookie quarterback to get their first start against. And the Saints have done this already, right? We can kind of shake off the voodoo of the Saints going up against first-time starters in the NFL because they got a win last time against Justin Herbert, who looked really good, don't get me wrong, when the Saints hosted the Los Angeles Chargers, but the Saints still got that win. So let's not forget that. So you'll see him with a lesser talented offensive line in front of him dealing with some injuries, some major injuries, lesser talented skill position players around him as well. But the Saints, I'm really curious if this might be one of those games where they might get caught off guard by the run game a little bit with Boston Scott and Miles Sanders. It's a very talented backfield. It doesn't get a lot of credit across the NFL. So there's a lot to watch for in this game, but one of the biggest things that's going to always come up over and over again as we get ready for this week is Jalen Hurts. How is he going to perform as the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, and how can the Saints make his first start a memorable one for all the right reasons as a Saints fan, all the wrong reasons for Jalen Hurts. All right, y'all, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of What Just Happened here on the Canal Street Chronicles YouTube page. We appreciate you very much for coming through. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Let us know what it is that you thought of the Saints' 9th straight win against the Atlanta Falcons, clinching their playoff spot. And then, of course, let us know what you've got and what you're thinking for this upcoming game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Score predictions, bold predictions, everything you got. Go ahead and drop those in the comments so that we can make sure that we comment back and get a little bit of participation going with you as well. So go ahead and drop those below. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Check out the website as well at canalstreetchronicles.com. We got a lot coming up for you all here throughout the week that we're very excited to share. And we appreciate you very much for all your support and for being here with us.